What was the most shocking thing you heard the quiet kid say? In class, he asked the woman teacher if he could go to the toilet. She sternly replied, "You've got 2 minutes, Richard." And Richard says, 2 minutes? It takes me that long to unravel it. Teacher goes red and everyone loses it. We were having a bullcrap elective course and we ran out of stuff to do, so we wound up having story time. My friend walks up to the front and starts telling us about how once he got pretty badly injured. Basically, he was walking into his friend's house, slipped on some black ice, face planted on it, and his front teeth tore off most of his front lip and broke off. He ran into the house babbling and bleeding. He was like 11 and missing part of his face, so he wasn't 100% coherent at the time. And his friend's mom takes one look, runs into her bedroom, locks the door, and doesn't do anything until my friend's dad arrives and starts screaming at her. My friend says he still has no idea why the grown adult woman couldn't handle the situation any better, and we all start making guesses and bullcrap psychoanalysis. Cue the quiet kid raising his magnificent head and blessing us with enlightenment. Maybe she just needed to finger herself real quick. So this one kid, who barely ever said 2 words one day, asked the teacher for the time. It was at some after-school thing and there was no clock. The teacher says the classic, "Time for you to get a watch," which for some reason was funny to everyone else. The quiet kid doesn't laugh. He looks the teacher dead in the eyes, and once everyone quieted down, he says, "So are you gonna tell me the freaking time or what?" We were in like 7th grade. In class we were studying genetics and one guy was being a real jerk and the teacher couldn't get him to shut up. Then after discussing inbreeding in dogs, one quiet kid raises his hand and says, "So is this likely how Peter became so freaking stupid?" The jerk kid who constantly screwed with people was in line with the quiet kid and the quiet kid's friend. The quiet kid is a bit overweight, so when he gets up to the lunch lady and gets his chicken nuggets, the jerk says, "You don't want extra nuggets, big guy?" The quiet kid out of nowhere just starts ranting. "No, I'm all set, but what are you up to this weekend? You want to hang out, grab some food, maybe screw a bit? I like to be on top and you look like a bottom. What do you say, want to screw tonight?" The entire line is dead silent. The jerk starts getting all mad and acting like he's going to start a fight, and the quiet kid says, "Okay, fine, you can be top, baby." The jerk kid leaves to the entire line laughing their butts off at his expense. No idea if the quiet kid was gay or he just knew that even jokingly suggesting the jerk kid was a homosexual would upset him more than anything. But I do know he left the line with his delicious chicken nuggets and a huge smile on his face. Quiet guy I work with never said much until he came up to me and asked what happens when an Eskimo is pleasured. Before I get the chance to respond, he throws a handful of ice at me and walks away. In junior high, in the mid-'80s, the game Trivial Pursuit was all the rage. We played it in math class one day, and this kid, Gary, who never said anything at all, totally spanked everyone else by answering every single sports-related trivia question. He got a lot of attention for it, and I believe he walked a little taller after that day. I don't think I ever heard him say anything else, but I did see him sitting on the bleachers at a few sports events. The quiet kid from my grade stood up one day, grabbed a broom, stood on a chair, and began trying to swat bees that got inside. One bee landed on the window where a quiet kid proceeded to yell, "Die, bee! Die!" and then swatted and shattered the window. He screeched when it happened and then sat back down. Never heard him speak again. One of my students hardly said a word all year until a couple of weeks ago. I was trying to get a group of talkative ones under control and she had enough. She yells out, "Shut the heck up! I'm trying to work, you freaking jerks!" Awkward silence followed because I didn't know how to handle the normally studious and quiet one losing it. I was like this in middle school. Not exactly quiet, but I never really socialized except with people right beside me in the form of asking for a pencil. One day, the classroom jerk happened to be more jerky than I could stand for, and I stood up out of my seat and yelled at him and sat back down. The entire class fell silent, but he never got that jerky again. I was best friends with the quiet kid in middle school. It wasn't so much shocking as the stupidest thing I've heard him say. He got this 1,000-yard stare all of a sudden and just said, "I can't remember what color my dog is." My dad is very quiet, to the point that it makes most people uncomfortable, even me sometimes. One day we're at the park and a woman walks past us and my dad quickly says, "What if I punched that woman in the face and said, 'Sorry, I thought you were my wife'?" In high school, there was this really quiet girl named Grace. She was a pleasant person, but wouldn't say anything more than hi or sorry unless you asked her something. Even then, she'd appear terrified. It was at prom and I was in the parking lot of the venue we had prom at. I lost a contact and had to run to my car to grab my glasses. In the parking lot, Grace was smiling and walking from her car. She looked at me, laughed, and said, "My prom date just pleasured the heck out of me." I still laugh about it to this day. He started to attack someone in my class with a table when the teacher got a cup of coffee. That was quite something. Wait, he attacked another guy with a table? That's like a whole new level of angry right there. I was in marching band in high school, probably 7 years ago now, and we had this huge muscular guy as our brass instructor. He would always yell at us to nail these chords or, "You're not playing loud enough." There was this little Asian trumpet kid that was so innocent and nice, he hardly ever spoke a word. One really hot afternoon, our instructor was being especially loud and said, "Why don't the trumpets blow hard enough?" Dead silence across the field as all the brass are waiting for next instructions. Then we hear, "What doesn't your mom blow me hard enough?" from quiet trumpet kid. Needless to say, we all laughed, got push-ups, and laughed some more. Wow, literally this question came at a perfect time. I was just thinking about this, and it was by far in sophomore year of high school. This kid was so odd that honestly no one ever really noticed him, but one day he's sitting across from me at a table, and he sees this one girl in really tight shorts and goes, "Man, I could have my head up her butt for months." It was pretty shocking. 72 virgins is nowhere near enough virgins for eternity. That's like a week's worth of virgins. I went to middle school and high school with this boy named Daniel. Never once heard him say a word. A friend of mine said he would whisper sometimes. The night of our senior party, we heard some music coming over from the corner where the karaoke machine was set up. At first, no one really noticed him because people had been singing on it all night, and most people stopped paying attention. But this was different because no one was singing and the music was playing. The DJ stopped the music and started the song again. Daniel was standing there looking frightened. But this time around, when the song started, he began to sing. Everyone in the room stopped what they were doing and just crowded around him. He wasn't a great singer by any means, but 99% of the people in the room hadn't ever heard him talk. When the song was over, everyone started clapping and cheering, and he walked away with a big smile on his face. I actually really like that story. No matter what you do, there are always people who will support you. In kindergarten, there was this kid, Donatel, and he never said a word. He was nice enough, played games and everything, but completely silent. One day we were looking out the classroom window as a cop drove by. Donatel opens his mouth and says, "Police car." At the time, we were all excited to hear him speak, but looking back, that kid must have had some real dark history. In high school, I had first level Spanish with this kid who was super quiet. At the end of the year, we all had to give a speech in Spanish in front of the entire class. This dude stood up and gave a speech, not in Spanish, but in a language that he had spent the entire year inventing. Playing rugby, hooker fails completely at line out. Someone shouts jokingly, "Does anyone know any good hookers to replace Patrick?" Quiet to score on the team. Never hear him say anything. Maybe Patrick's mum can help. Proceed to fall on floor. So this isn't so much what he said. The seniors played locker pinball with the underclassmen. It's exactly what it sounds like. They bounced one little guy constantly. Made him late for class a lot because they keep him bouncing so long. Well, one day, they were bouncing him and he super politely said, "Please stop, you're hurting me." Obviously, the seniors bounced him harder. Apparently, that was this kid's breaking point because he leapt onto the nearest senior, who just happened to be our star basketball forward. The little freshman bit into the senior's neck and literally tore a mouthful of skin off. He just stood there with this piece of bloody skin on his shirt, growling at everyone. Needless to say, no one ever screwed with Mad Dog Mike after that. Jeremy. This guy was so silent that we believed he was a mute. The school had just recently painted the bins in all kind of weird styles. As our group was walking somewhere at lunchtime, we passed a bin that was covered in handprints. He offhandedly goes, "That bin is handy," leaving us dumbfounded at his pun bomb. We sat in the classroom, I think in 5th grade. My friend had done a PowerPoint presentation about Eminem. He talked about that he lived in a trailer as a young boy, and the quiet straight A student stands up and says, "Just like you," and asks to use the toilet. No one understood anything of what just happened. We live in North Europe. It's practically no one that lives in a trailer here. My friend didn't. If anything, I think that student was just looking for an excuse to be out of pocket. This one is pretty serious, so just a fair warning. Nothing. Let me explain. I took a class with Sung Hui Cho, the Virginia Tech shooter, one semester before the shooting. The class was called Contemporary Horror. It was a one-time elective offered by my favorite professor. We read horror novels and watched horror films and discussed the craft of creating scary stories, but also how they reflected or represented their era's fears. It was a great class. There were only about 15 students and it was discussion heavy. Cho was one of them. I honestly never noticed him, even in that small class, until halfway into the semester. He wasn't quiet, he was silent. So on the day we all finally noticed him, our professor asked him something directly, and Cho just stared at him. I can't remember the question, but the nature of it meant silence was potentially an acceptable and funny response, so we all laughed. Except Cho. He just kept staring at our professor. Our laughter awkwardly died, and after a few moments of uncomfortable silence, our professor just said, "Okay," and moved on. It was so strange, but I forgot about that weird moment until after his rampage. That professor later told me that Cho's papers had been disturbing, but the nature of our course meant the envelope was being pushed a bit, and it had never been bad enough to suggest he'd do what he did. That professor was a good man, and he admitted he struggled with not blaming himself on some level for 1, not identifying how severe Cho's mental health problems were, and 2, for the graphic and terrible nature of some of what we watched in that class, which may have inspired Cho. He knew that it was bullcrap, but a part of him couldn't help but feel some blame. It was terribly sad. Hopefully this next story will lighten some things up. There was this one quiet girl in my class, and she would never say anything. This was around 3rd or 4th grade, but I would always try and get her to talk. I would be nice, like when she had no paper in her binder, I'd take notice and give her some before she can ask. When she was searching for a pencil in her bag, I gave her an extra one I had. It was like small little acts, picking up her pencil when she dropped it, etc. Then at lunch, this kid was picking on me. I was short, weak, and very emotional back then. She came out of nowhere and told the guy, "I'll give you 3 seconds to walk away." I was stunned because those were the first words I've ever heard her say. The guy slapped me, and she did a straight kick to his balls after that. I was honored and shocked she ever said anything. She never said anything after that, but I did say thanks. Texted friend that I did get to keep in touch with from work back then. She said that quiet girl moved shortly after I did. She did have quiet girl's number, I called it, and it came up with "this landline has been disconnected." Now I'm struggling even more. I need to find this girl. The girl I texted, though, didn't even know her last name. No one really did, I guess. What high school she goes to is still unknown. Where she lives, still unknown. All is not lost, though. I'm still waiting on a Facebook Messenger reply to see if another girl knows her last name. I did try just typing in her first name on Facebook, and I probably typed Elena's name 100 different ways and found nothing. She's not able to be publicly searched on Facebook. Neither am I, but geez, it sucks. I have one last hope. If you can all cross your fingers with me, it might just work. I learned that I won't be able to talk to her. Through a list of people I got her mom's number, her mom apparently remembered me by name, and then she said that she is, in circumstances caused by family, not letting her talk to anyone or go anywhere for a while. I never was able to find out why, but, you know, it sucks. I'll update if I ever talk to her. If I ever see her, I'll take a photo with her. Tomorrow, I'm going to try to talk to her mom again to find out what happened. Thanks for the help, Reddit. If I ever marry her, I will share anything but her body and love with you. Thanks again, Reddit, for all y'all who have cared about my little story. As someone pointed out, it's been 5 months, and I want to add very little has changed. She and I still aren't exactly allowed to talk. I've talked to her mom a couple of times. I've talked to her once, and it's been better than the silence between the years. I've learned things like her current height and seen a picture of her, one she took when we got to chat once. But it doesn't look like there's much to work with in talking to her. Her mother was deemed unfit to parent or something like that in court against her dad's parents. I haven't asked about her dad, but I assume he's dead or ran off. I changed some of the things in this edit to avoid having too much info about her there, but I know I won't be able to take any of it down from the internet for good. So far, it looks like the only chance I get to talk to her again is when she turns 18 in a year and a half. Everyone, send your energy to that guy. We gotta get those two together. It's meant to be. One thing I always say, as a quiet guy, is whenever people are talking about me within earshot, they usually say something like, "That guy, he just never talks." Then I say, "No, but I hear everything." They all just kind of laugh awkwardly and slither away. I think it's weird how my lack of conversation is such a huge conversation starter. Our quiet kid was Tommy. Tommy never said anything ever. Out of all of the lunches we ate at our table senior year, I think Tommy was the only one who never told a story or even added anything to the conversation. He just always sat in the same spot along the wall, eating his lunch and laughing occasionally at our jokes. One day, we were sitting in the cafeteria eating lunch and sharing stories like we always do. My friend Raymond had spent the previous night with a girl named Haley. She was 2 years younger, but already had a reputation of hooking up with a lot of different guys. So he was telling us everything that went down, kind of bragging, even though nobody was really impressed as we were aware of Haley's reputation. Anyways, Raymond gets done telling his story, then proceeds to pull out a sandwich. I think it was some sort of fish. It didn't look very appealing to Raymond or us, so he says, "This looks disgusting, but I'll give it a try anyways," and proceeds to take a bite. In pipes Tommy, "Is that what you said about Haley last night?" Everyone explodes into laughter, drawing the attention to the entire cafeteria. Raymond is just sitting there mid-bite, stunned. I'm bent over in pain from laughing. Others are on the floor. One guy ran to the bathroom because he thought he was going to puke from laughing. Even Ray had to laugh. I never noticed him laugh, but Tommy had this sly grin on his face the rest of the lunch hour. I was, and still am, a geek, and I got bullied a lot in school. The Columbine massacre happened when I was in 8th grade, and all of a sudden, everyone started thinking a bit more carefully about the ramifications of spending years physically and psychologically torturing kids who were too small or afraid to fight back. I didn't make the connection at the time. The bullying kind of fizzled out for me in high school, and I just thought it was because everyone was getting more mature and empathetic and growing less cliquey, and I was delighted that some of the popular people were suddenly being so generous and friendly with me. It wasn't until one of these people asked me if I'd kill her if I brought a gun to school and shot everyone, I realized that a lot of the recent kindness the popular kids were suddenly displaying towards me was not necessarily coming from a genuine place. I was deeply insulted that anyone ever thought I would do anything like that, and deeply hurt that the other kids didn't actually like me. They were just afraid of me, and were being nice to me out of fear. A lot of the other established nerdy kids were in the same boat as me, including this one kid, Pat. I didn't know him very well, but he was frail, pale, bespectacled, highly intelligent, and quiet as a church mouse, so he was already on my radar as a potential ally. We were in an SAT prep course together, and I started sitting next to him. He didn't say much of anything to me or anyone for a few weeks. Then, one day as we were all settling in and waiting for the teacher, one of the popular girls who was particularly bubbly and not particularly gifted with intelligence said, "Pat, I used to think you were going to come to school and shoot everyone, but now I know I was wrong." Pat looked down towards his desk, stroked his chin thoughtfully, and said, "We'll see." And the rest is history. Pat and I are still close friends to this day. Freshman, innocent, quiet girl on the spikes on top of German helmets from the war. "They look like painful butt plugs." We were chilling in a bar in Prague and someone rolled up some hash oil and tobacco and passed it around. The quiet kid hit it and got even quieter. 20 minutes later, some aggressive growling black metal comes on and out of nowhere he yells, "Kill your parents!" We absolutely lost it. He was pretty happy with himself. I'm the quiet kid. One day, before my economics class started, this guy turned around in his desk and asked me what I thought he'd be when he grew up. He never took anything seriously and joked around a lot, so I answered, definitely a porn star. The girl next to me started laughing really hard, and even when class started, she didn't stop. The teacher walked over to her and asked her what she was laughing about. When she finally calmed down to answer, she said, "He said that Daniel's gonna be a porn star," and the whole class heard it. Everybody, including my teacher, was staring at me with shocked looks on their faces. I turned bright red and couldn't find any valid excuse for what I'd said, and that's why I never talk. I'm not overly quiet, but I had a similar moment where I got ratted out by someone in class. A football player who sat next to me in English, who was not known for his intelligence, but had a good humor about it, got an A on a test. He was shocked and bemused, as were the rest of us. I said, "What, did you screw Mrs. Brown?" And everyone around us starts laughing. Mrs. Brown asks what's funny, in a non-hostile way, and I just pass it off as a dumb joke. But then Stephanie, the tattling quim in front of me, tells her exactly what I said. So then I'm out in the hall with my 50-something English teacher who was asking why I, who was such a nice boy who would say something like that, freaking suck-ups. I wasn't there, but in my announcing techniques class, teaches you how to present yourself and speak for radio and television. We were filming how-to videos in the studio, and the professor was telling us past examples of good and bad projects. One in particular was done by a very shy, awkward kid who came to the studio with a friend and a metal box. He so casually proceeds to pull a bunch of knives out of the box and film his video on the best ways to use the knives in combat, with very specific and effective ways to kill somebody using his friend as a dummy. He was very volatile with his movements, and his friend apparently didn't even bat an eye. The professor then explained that despite how uncomfortable it made him and the rest of the class, he had to give him an A because his presentation was actually put together pretty well. Quiet kid sneezes. Boy behind her, "God bless you." Her, "God isn't real." An annoying friend, "Dylan, you're so freaking stupid sometimes." Dylan, "At least I don't suck massive eggplant all the time." Someone once turned to me and said, "Dude, you're always so quiet, like a serial killer or something." I immediately responded, "Thank you." Looks of shock and horror as I realized what I said. In college, our fraternity had a pledge who was clearly awkward with girls, but was otherwise a real cool guy. Normally, Dan was super proper and a bit shy when talking to girls, but not this night. On this night, when Dan was asked about what kind of girl he wanted to date, he told our sweetheart, "The kind of girl who loves to be crushed." I'm not sure if Dan ever crushed, but that line became a staple in our frat for a while. I will never forget this as long as I live. It was like perfect cinema in real life. This quiet, weird girl in 10th or 11th grade always wore this giant coat and looked messy. She was a bigger girl and had a sister who was super pretty and skinny and popular. As I type this out, I realize it sounds fake or like a movie. Anyway, this big, awkward, quiet, friendless girl shows up at a talent show at the school. People weren't being obviously mean, but there was definitely an air of what the heck when she came out on stage in her big, messy coat and disheveled clothes. She sat on the piano and started to play and sing and just... my God, it was surreal. She sang this haunting bluesy song no one had ever heard before, and the auditorium just went dead silent. I distinctly remember tearing up, and I'm tearing up 20 years later now just remembering it. Who the heck knew? In middle school, the quiet kid Steven had an arch rival, Robbie. In class, Robbie always seemed to come out on top of their little scuffles, mostly because Steven couldn't really formulate or execute a burn or a comeback. He just rolled over and let Robbie get his insults in until the teacher stepped in. One day, I was walking behind Robbie after that class, and Steven Lee quietly crept up behind him. Before Robbie could even turn around, he got as close as possible and said, "If I was to come into your house and kill you while you were sleeping, I doubt anyone would even notice." Then he disappeared into the darkness of the science hallway. I don't remember the exact words, but that was pretty darn close. I was about 55% shocked, 30% laughing hysterically on the inside, and 15% terrified. Robbie never made fun of old Stevie again. I caught him looking at not safe for work My Little Pony pictures on his phone. That was awkward. I was a substitute teacher for a year after college. There was a 7th grade girl that all the other girls adored. At the age of 13, she was already a fake tan cheerleader and thought the world of herself and cared little for her classmates. One day in study hall, she was lying, to her friends about her string of boyfriends. The other girls were hanging on to every word she said. We'll call her Cordelia. Now, to set the necessary geography of this scene, there was a very quiet boy at the computer in the back of the classroom. He hadn't said a word all period. Anyway, I just want to date a boy that's dumber than me. That way, he'd do whatever I want because all he wants is, you knows. Cordelia, if you were dating anyone dumber than you would be pushing him around in a wheelchair and wiping drool off his face. Immediately, Cordelia looked at me, dumbfounded. She expected me to yell at him or send him to the office. No matter how hard I tried, I could not stop laughing. It was the most hysterical thing I'd heard all year. My friend told me about how they were watching Little Shop of Horrors in their theater class. There was this one kid who nearly never said anything, but apparently during one of the scenes with tentacles or vines or something, I've never actually seen it myself, out of nowhere this kid says to the class, "Well, I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going."